He bought a Bloodline Pact on the dark web for $400. The original owner was still using it. There is a particular cruelty in transactions that seem too simple. A price that feels right, a seller who provides exactly what was advertised, an item that arrives as described in good condition with clear instructions. The cruelty lives not in deception, but in the fine print, in the clause that exists not on paper, but in the nature of the thing itself, in rules older than commerce, older than contracts, older than the very concept of ownership as we understand it. Alex Varro was a broke 22-year-old who needed money and found, on a dark web marketplace called the Crimson Ledger, a deal that seemed almost too minor to worry about. A minor ancestral claim, used, discounted, no returns. He paid $400. He followed the instructions. He anointed his tongue with dried blood from a vial that smelled faintly of something he couldn't identify. Old parchment, he thought, or old iron. He didn't read the fine print. There wasn't any. There didn't need to be. The sorcerer who had filed the claim was already on his way. The Crimson Ledger operated on a 33-year cycle, and Alex Varro found it during the wrong one. He was a junior at a state university in Ohio studying philosophy, a major his father called decorative, and was behind on rent, behind on credit cards, and 3 weeks away from having his laptop repossessed by the student loan company that had erroneously classified it as collateral. He had been spending his evenings on forums he was not proud of, looking for anything that might qualify as income. The Crimson Ledger had appeared in a thread he'd never find again if he searched for it. A forum post with a link, the link with a .onion address, the address opening into a marketplace of extraordinary visual restraint. Dark burgundy background, gold serif font, no images, no flashy headers, just a list, items available. Bidding closes when the cycle ends. Most of the listings were incomprehensible or priced beyond any reality he could participate in. Tertiary infernal license, transferable. Opening bid, $41,000. Full covenant deed, 7-generation scope. Buy now, $290,000. Void marked estate claim. Do not bid if unrepresented. But at the very bottom of the list, almost apologetically small, was a listing that read, Minor Ancestral Claim. Bloodline only. No infernal entanglements. One previous owner. Buy now. $400. He read the listing 3 times. He searched the terms. He found nothing coherent. He interpreted this as confirmation that it was probably nonsense, possibly art, maybe an elaborate joke. He paid the $400. The vial arrived 4 days later in a plain, padded envelope with no return address. It was a glass apothecary bottle, heat-sealed, containing approximately a tablespoon of dark, rust-colored powder that had once been liquid. The accompanying card, ivory cardstock, copper ink, immaculate copper plate handwriting, read, Anoint the tongue at the threshold of your home at midnight. Speak your full name, including all names given and withheld. Seal with silence for 1 full hour. He followed the instructions on a Thursday night, because he had no reason not to, and it seemed like the kind of thing that would be funny to tell people about later. The powder on his tongue tasted of copper and something vegetal and extremely old, like soil from a place that had not seen rain in a very long time. He stood in the doorway of his apartment, spoke his name, Alexander James Varro, and sat in silence for an hour while his roommate played video games loudly in the next room. Nothing happened. He went to sleep. The first change appeared in a photo his mother texted him the following Saturday, a digitized print from his grandparents' 1962 wedding. He had seen this photo many times before. His grandparents stood beneath an oak tree, young and formal and slightly awkward in their finery. Behind them, a church door, a pair of older relatives Alex had never identified, and, this was new, a figure standing at the far left edge of the frame, slightly behind a tree, visible only as a shoulder and the lower half of a face and one gloved hand. The figure was wearing a hooded coat. The hood was up. Alex looked at the photo for a long time. He searched his memory of the photo. He asked his mother if she remembered the figure being there. She looked at it again and said, "I don't know, maybe one of your grandfather's cousins." But her voice, on the phone, had a quality that suggested she was looking at something she wished she hadn't. He pulled out every physical family photo he owned. The figure was in all of them. Not prominently, never centered, never facing the camera, but present. At the edges, at the back, half obscured by door frames or other people or foliage. Always hooded, always gloved. Always the same proportions, same posture, same quality of being there without having been invited. In a Polaroid from 1987, the figure stood in the background of his mother's childhood birthday party. In a scanned daguerreotype from the 1890s, it stood at the very edge of a formal portrait of his great-great-grandparents, partially behind a heavy curtain. Alex did what any reasonably alarmed 22-year-old philosophy student would do. He posted about it online. The responses were mostly fascination and several theories about photographic artifacts. One response, from an account that had been created that morning and would be deleted by evening, read simply, "That isn't an anomaly. That is Prosper Voss. He has been in your family photos since 1789. He needs you to understand that the $400 purchase price was not a sale. It was a deposit. He is coming to collect the balance." Alex stared at this message for a long time before replying. By the time he typed his response, the account was gone. Prosper Voss had been born in 1741 in a village outside Strasbourg, the son of a clockmaker who doubled as an amateur alchemist. By the time Prosper was 22, Alex's exact age, he had traded his soul to an entity that dealt exclusively in bloodline futures, not individual souls, but the rights to an entire living lineage. The entity had agreed to a single condition. Prosper's consciousness would remain in the world, anchored to the bloodline claim, for as long as the claim remained valid. He had faked his death in 1789, transferred the claim to his own bloodline's future, and waited. He had been waiting for 234 years. The minor ancestral claim was not a curse and not a deed. It was a ticket, a reclamation instrument that, once activated by the bloodline recipient, initiated a legal process under laws considerably older than any human legal system. The activation phrase had been Alex's full name. The binding agent had been Alex's own tongue, which carried traces of his bloodline in every cell. The 1-hour silence was the acceptance window. Alex had accepted. The reclamation process required that the claimed blood be returned to the original claimant, while the claimant's consciousness transferred into the recipient's living body. The process required the heart to be beating. It required surgical precision. It required the proper tools. Prosper Voss arrived on a Wednesday evening, 11 days after the vial's arrival, while Alex was alone in his apartment studying. He was, as Alex would later have no opportunity to report, exactly what the edge of those photographs had suggested. Tall, spare, dressed in a coat that had the quality of being anachronistic without being obviously period-specific, with hands that moved with the particular deliberateness of someone accustomed to extremely fine work. He carried a leather case. From the case, laid on the kitchen table with the care of a craftsman setting out instruments he has maintained for over 2 centuries, came the tools, lancets and retractors of antique surgical design, their handles yellowed ivory, their blades still bright. A gramophone, small and travel-sized, was set on the counter. A record was placed. Strauss began to play. Alex was not unconscious. That had been an important clause in the original entity's terms. The body must be fully inhabited, fully present for the transfer to hold. Prosper had explained this briefly and not unkindly while he worked. "You paid $400, he had said, in accented English that sounded as though he had learned it recently from a large number of books, for something that has been owed to me for 234 years. I want you to know that I bear you no particular ill will. You were, in the architecture of these things, simply the last available node of a very long chain." The gramophone played on. The lancets were extraordinary quality. Prosper Voss sat in Alex's body afterward for a long time, getting accustomed to the dimensions of it, the particular weight, the new century's unfamiliar sensory grammar. He was thorough. He had always been thorough. He packed away his tools, cleaned the kitchen, and stood at the window looking out at a city in a year he had not been present in, properly, since long before it existed. He had plans. He had 2 centuries of plans. He made coffee. This body seemed to require it, and found, in the phone on the counter, that the internet was a remarkable thing that Prosper Voss intended to use extensively. He was not cruel about it. He truly wasn't. But he was 234 years old, and he had been waiting long enough. He paid $400. He followed the instructions. He did exactly what the card told him to do, and not one thing more. And that was precisely the problem. A minor ancestral claim sounds, I imagine, like the smallest possible thing one could acquire from a dark web auction of bloodline pacts. Minor, ancestral, almost quaint, almost historical. The kind of thing a collector might buy for novelty, the way someone buys a novelty wax seal or a vintage apothecary bottle. For the aesthetic, for the story, for something to put on a shelf. What I want you to sit with is the figure in the photographs, the hooded figure that had been standing at the edges of Alex's family photos since 1789. It was always there. In every image, at every celebration, every formal portrait, every birthday and wedding and Sunday afternoon, preserved in silver and light, it had been there, patient and gloved and present, for 234 years. He wasn't haunting the family. He was monitoring his investment. The Crimson Ledger's listing called it one previous owner. The listing was not inaccurate. There had been exactly one. Prosper Voss, who had never let go of it, who had engineered its passage through generations specifically to land, eventually, in the hands of someone who would pay $400 for something they didn't understand. The dark web, as it turns out, has ancient roots, and some auctions were never meant to sell anything at all. Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Ilara, and I am your whisperer. I'll be here, waiting for you next time. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. I want to hear your stories. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more. This has been Karma Quietly Whispers. See you soon.